Welcome to Sleepless Survivors. Tonight, we journey into one of humanity's most enduring mysteries, a story that spans millennia, crossing ancient civilizations and modern speculation. This is the tale of the Anunnaki, beings who some believe descended from the heavens to shape the very foundation of human existence. So settle in, close your eyes, and let your mind drift through the corridors of ancient history and cosmic possibility. In the beginning, there were questions. Questions that have haunted humanity since we first gazed up at the stars and wondered about our place in the universe. Where did we come from? Why are we here? Are we alone? These fundamental inquiries have driven our species forward, inspiring religions, philosophies, and scientific pursuits that have shaped the course of civilization. But what if the answers to these questions were not as straightforward as we have been led to believe? What if, hidden within the clay tablets of ancient Mesopotamia, there lies a truth so profound, so world-altering, that it challenges everything we think we know about human origins? This is the premise at the heart of the Anunnaki Conspiracy, a narrative that has captivated researchers, theorists, and seekers of alternative history for decades. According to this theory, humanity did not evolve naturally through the slow processes of Darwinian evolution. Instead, we were created, engineered, and cultivated by an advanced extraterrestrial race known as the Anunnaki. The word Anunnaki itself derives from ancient Sumerian, translating roughly to those who from heaven to earth came. In the cuneiform texts of the world's first known civilization, the Sumerians, these beings are described not as mythological deities in the abstract sense, but as flesh and blood entities who walked among humans, ruled over cities, and imparted knowledge that would transform primitive hunter-gatherers into builders of magnificent civilizations. The Sumerians appeared seemingly out of nowhere around 4500 BCE in the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in what is now modern-day Iraq. Within a remarkably short period, they developed sophisticated systems of writing, mathematics, astronomy, law, and architecture. They built the first cities, established complex bureaucracies, and created works of art and literature that still resonate today. This sudden flowering of civilization has long puzzled historians and archaeologists. How did a people with no apparent precursor culture achieve so much so quickly? The Anunnaki theory offers an explanation that, while controversial and rejected by mainstream academia, provides a narrative framework that accounts for this mysterious leap forward. According to the ancient texts, particularly those translated and interpreted by scholars like Zecharia Sitchin, the Anunnaki came to Earth approximately 450,000 years ago from a planet called Nibiru. This 12th planet in our solar system, according to Sitchin's reading of Sumerian astronomy, follows a vast elliptical orbit that brings it into the inner solar system only once every 3,600 years. The Anunnaki, facing a crisis on their home world, came to Earth in search of gold. But this was no mere quest for wealth or adornment. The gold they sought was needed to repair their planet's deteriorating atmosphere, to be suspended as fine particles in the upper reaches of Nibiru's sky, where it would act as a shield against harmful radiation and help retain heat. At first, the Anunnaki themselves performed the grueling labour of mining gold from the earth. Deep in what is now southern Africa, they established mining operations, extracting the precious metal from the ground. But mining is hard work, dangerous and exhausting, even for beings far more advanced than humans. The Anunnaki workers, known as the Igigi, toiled for thousands of years until they could bear it no longer. Approximately 300,000 years ago, according to the timeline presented in these ancient sources, the Igigi rebelled. They laid down their tools, refused to continue the backbreaking work, and demanded relief from their leaders. This crisis prompted a solution that would forever change the course of Earth's history. Enki, one of the chief scientists among the Anunnaki, and son of their king Anu, proposed a radical solution. Using the primitive hominids that already existed on Earth, he would create a worker species. Through genetic engineering combining Anunnaki DNA with that of Homo erectus, a new being would be brought into existence. This being would be intelligent enough to understand commands and perform complex tasks, yet subservient enough to serve the needs of their creators. Thus, according to this narrative, humanity was born, not through the slow accumulation of random mutations and natural selection, but through deliberate design. We were created as a slave species, fashioned in the image of our makers, imbued with a spark of their consciousness, yet forever marked by our hybrid nature. The parallels to the biblical creation story are striking, and according to proponents of the Anunnaki theory, not coincidental. The Book of Genesis speaks of the Elohim, a plural term often translated as God, creating humans in our image. The Nephilim, mentioned briefly in Genesis chapter 6, are described as the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. These giants, these mighty warriors of old, appear in numerous ancient traditions across cultures. Could Elohim and Anunnaki be different names for the same entities? Could the ancient Hebrews have inherited these stories from the earlier Sumerian civilization, adapting and reinterpreting them through the lens of monotheism? The Anunnaki theory suggests that many of the world's religions and mythologies are actually garbled accounts of real historical events, the memories of a time when gods walked the earth, not as supernatural beings, but as flesh and blood visitors from another world. The creation of humans was not a singular event, but an ongoing process of refinement. The first attempts, according to the texts, resulted in beings that were somehow flawed or inadequate. It took multiple iterations, various combinations of genetic material and techniques, before a suitable worker was created. These early humans could not reproduce, a feature apparently built into their design to maintain control over the population. But eventually, whether through intentional modification or accidental mutation, humans gained the ability to procreate naturally. We began to multiply upon the earth, filling the lands, developing our own primitive cultures. Some of the Anunnaki began to take human women as mates, creating hybrid offspring that were stronger, more intelligent and longer lived than pure humans. These hybrids became the heroes, kings and legendary figures of ancient lore. The relationship between the Anunnaki and humanity was complex and fraught with conflict. Different factions among the Anunnaki held different views on how humans should be treated. Enki, who had a hand in our creation, developed a certain affection for humanity. He's portrayed in the texts as a benefactor, a teacher who shared knowledge with his creations even when it was forbidden to do so. Enlil, Enki's brother and rival, held a harsher view. As the chief administrator of Earth operations, Enlil saw humans as a necessary tool, but one that needed to be controlled and kept in check. The ancient texts describe numerous conflicts between these two powerful beings, with humanity often caught in the crossfire of their disagreements. One of the most dramatic episodes in this cosmic drama is the story of the Great Flood. This narrative, found in various forms across ancient cultures from Mesopotamia to India to the Americas, takes on new significance when viewed through the lens of the Anunnaki theory. According to Sitchin's interpretation of the ancient texts, the Anunnaki leadership, particularly Enlil, became disturbed by humanity's rapid population growth and increasing independence. When they learned through their advanced understanding of planetary mechanics that a massive flood was coming, caused by the gravitational effects of Nibiru's approach, they decided to take no action to warn or save the humans. This would be a natural solution to what they perceived as the human problem. But Enki, unwilling to see his creations entirely destroyed, defied the council's decision. He came to a human named Utnapishtim, known in the biblical tradition as Noah, and warned him of the coming deluge. He instructed him to build a boat, to gather his family and representatives of the animal kingdom, to preserve life through the coming catastrophe. The flood came, just as predicted. The walls of water swept across the earth, destroying civilizations, erasing the evidence of hundreds of thousands of years of Anunnaki presence and human development. When the waters finally receded and the Anunnaki returned from the orbital platforms where they had taken refuge, they found a cleansed world, but also a world without the workers they still needed. Enlil, despite his initial anger at Enki's interference, eventually recognized the necessity of humanity's survival. A new covenant was established. Humans would be allowed to thrive and multiply, but they would serve the Anunnaki, worship them as gods, and provide labor and tribute. The age of direct Anunnaki rule over humanity had begun. This is when the great civilizations of antiquity rose. In Mesopotamia, in Egypt, in the Indus Valley, sophisticated cultures appeared with remarkable suddenness, each with its own pantheon of gods who bore striking similarities to one another. These were not primitive superstitions the Anunnaki theory suggests, but actual memories of the Anunnaki themselves, each culture preserving accounts of the particular beings who had ruled over them. In Sumer, the gods had names like An, Enlil, Enki, Inanna, and Utu. In Egypt, they were called Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Ra. In India, they appeared as the Devas and Asuras. In Greece, as Zeus, Athena, and Apollo. Different names, different cultural contexts, but fundamentally similar beings with similar attributes, relationships, and conflicts. These gods were not omnipotent or omniscient. They had their own limitations, their own fears and desires. They fought among themselves, formed alliances, betrayed one another, and used humans as pawns in their power struggles. The ancient texts are filled with accounts of these divine conflicts, wars in heaven that spilled over into earthly affairs, catastrophes and wonders that shaped the destiny of nations. The cities of ancient Sumer were each dedicated to a particular Anunnaki deity, who served as its patron and protector. Eridu belonged to Enki, Nippur to Enlil, Uruk to Inanna, and so on. These gods did not merely receive worship from afar, they resided in the temples at the heart of each city, housed in structures called ziggurats, massive stepped pyramids that dominated the landscape. The ziggurat was not simply a place of worship in the way we might think of a church or temple today. It was literally the house of the god, complete with living quarters, dining areas, and private chambers. Priests attended to the god's daily needs, providing food offerings, performing rituals, and maintaining the sacred space. The god in turn provided protection, guidance, and prosperity to the city. But where were these gods? If they were physical beings, as the theory suggests, where did they come from, and where did they go? According to the ancient accounts, they descended from the sky in vehicles that roared like thunder and blazed like fire. The Sumerian word for these celestial crafts translates roughly to boats of heaven, or sky chambers. When gods travelled between cities or ascended to their celestial abode, they did so in these flying machines, leaving trails of fire across the sky. The descriptions of these vehicles in ancient texts bear an intriguing resemblance to modern accounts of UFO sightings. They moved with incredible speed, could hover in place, emitted bright lights and loud sounds, and sometimes left physical effects on the ground where they landed. The prophet Ezekiel's vision in the Bible, with its wheels within wheels and beings of crystal and fire, has been analysed by some researchers as a description of an advanced spacecraft. If the Anunnaki were indeed extraterrestrial visitors with advanced technology, what evidence would we expect to find? Interestingly, there are numerous anomalies in the archaeological record that mainstream science struggles to explain, anomalies that take on new significance when viewed through this alternative framework. Consider the precision of ancient megalithic structures. The pyramids of Giza in Egypt, aligned with astronomical precision, built with blocks weighing dozens of tons, fitted together so tightly that a razor blade cannot fit between the stones. The conventional explanation attributes this to primitive tools, copper chisels and wooden rollers, combined with massive amounts of human labour. But is this explanation adequate? Modern engineers, examining these structures with contemporary eyes, express scepticism that such precision could be achieved without advanced tools and mathematical knowledge. The Great Pyramid's orientation to true north is accurate to within a fraction of a degree. Its dimensions encode mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio. The three pyramids of the Giza Plateau align perfectly with the stars of Orion's belt as they appeared in the sky around 10,500 BCE, thousands of years before the pyramids were supposedly built. Similar precision appears in structures around the world. Pumapunku in Bolivia features stone blocks cut with such accuracy that they appear to have been machined. The joints and angles show tolerances that would challenge modern stonemasons. The Sacsayhuaman walls in Peru are constructed from massive polygonal stones, some weighing over 100 tons, fitted together in complex three-dimensional patterns without mortar, yet so precisely that they have survived centuries of earthquakes that destroyed later Spanish constructions. How did ancient people, supposedly lacking the wheel, lacking iron tools, lacking any technology beyond the most basic implements, accomplish these feats? The Anunnaki theory offers a straightforward explanation. They didn't. These structures were built with the assistance or direction of beings who possessed far more advanced capabilities. But the physical evidence extends beyond impressive architecture. There are artifacts that seem to depict technological knowledge that should not exist in the ancient world. In the ancient Egyptian temple of Dendera, a carved relief shows what appears to be a large light bulb, complete with a filament and power source, in the temple of Abydos. Hieroglyphs seem to depict modern vehicles including helicopters and submarines. Mainstream archaeologists dismiss these as pareidolia, seeing patterns where none exist, or as palimpsests, where later carvings overlay and alter earlier ones. But proponents of ancient astronaut theories argue that the consistency of such anomalies across cultures and time periods suggests something more than coincidence. Ancient texts also contain descriptions of technology that seems far beyond the capabilities of the time. The Mahabharata, the great Sanskrit epic of India, describes weapons of immense destructive power, vimanas or flying craft, that could travel to distant places, and battles in the sky between these flying machines. The descriptions of these weapons, their effects, and the devastation they caused bear an unsettling resemblance to nuclear warfare. In the 1990s, an Italian researcher named Davenport examined ancient Mohenjo-Daro, one of the great cities of the Indus Valley civilization that mysteriously collapsed around 1500 BCE. He found evidence of extreme heat, hot enough to vitrify pottery and melt stone, concentrated in specific areas of the city. Skeletons were found lying in the streets, suddenly dead as if fleeing some catastrophe. The radioactivity levels at the site were reportedly higher than background levels, though these claims remain controversial. Could this be evidence of ancient nuclear warfare, conflicts between the Anunnaki factions using weapons of devastating power? It sounds far-fetched, almost absurd. Yet the ancient texts describe exactly such weapons, and the physical evidence, however debated, suggests catastrophes of a scale and nature difficult to explain through conventional means. The genetic evidence presents another intriguing angle. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, appeared relatively suddenly in the fossil record approximately 200,000 years ago. We are genetically quite distinct from our supposed ancestors, with a significant gap in the evolutionary chain. Our 46 chromosomes are an anomaly among great apes. Other primates have 48. It's as if somewhere in our past 2 chromosomes were fused together, a change that would typically be fatal or severely disadvantageous, yet in our case seemed to coincide with a leap forward in cognitive abilities. The Human Genome Project, completed in 2003, revealed that humans possess approximately 223 genes that appear to have no predecessors in the genetic tree. These genes do not appear in any other primate species, nor in any other form of life on Earth. They seemingly appeared from nowhere. Conventional science attributes this to horizontal gene transfer from bacteria, but the Anunnaki theory offers an alternative. These are the genetic gifts of our extraterrestrial creators, the DNA sequences that make us human. Furthermore, the sudden emergence of advanced cognitive abilities in humans, what scientists call the Great Leap Forward, occurring around 50,000 years ago, remains poorly understood. Humans had existed for over 150,000 years with seemingly little cultural development. Then, abruptly, we see the appearance of art, music, complex tools, ritual burial, and symbolic thought. What triggered this transformation? Was it purely evolutionary, or was there an intervention, a genetic upgrade perhaps, by the Anunnaki? The human brain itself is an anomaly. It consumes a disproportionate amount of energy, about 20% of the body's total, despite representing only 2% of body mass. From a pure survival standpoint, this is inefficient. Natural selection typically optimizes for efficiency, yet our brains are energy gluttons. Moreover, we use only a small fraction of our brain's potential capacity. Why would evolution produce such an oversized, energy-intensive organ? The Anunnaki theory suggests that we were designed this way intentionally, created with greater cognitive capacity than strictly necessary for our initial purpose as labourers, because we were made in the image of our creators. We inherited their capacity for complex thought, creativity, and consciousness, perhaps more than they initially intended to give us. This gift of consciousness, this divine spark, is what makes us human. It's what allowed us to eventually break free from our servitude, to develop our own civilizations, to ask questions about our origins. It's what makes the story of human history not just one of passive subjection, but of gradual awakening and empowerment. As time passed, the direct presence of the Anunnaki on Earth diminished. According to the theory, this withdrawal had multiple causes. The approach of Nibiru's perihelion, the point where it comes closest to the Sun, required many Anunnaki to return to their homeworld. The conflicts among their own factions had grown wearisome. humanity had multiplied and spread to such an extent that direct governance was no longer practical. But they did not completely abandon their creation. Instead, they established a system of indirect rule through intermediaries. They selected certain human bloodlines, families that had a higher percentage of Anunnaki DNA due to past interbreeding, and elevated these to positions of power. These became the royal dynasties of the ancient world, the pharaohs and priest-kings who ruled by divine right. This concept of divine kingship appears consistently across ancient civilizations. The pharaohs of Egypt were considered gods incarnate, intermediaries between heaven and earth. The kings of Mesopotamia received their authority directly from the gods in elaborate coronation ceremonies. The emperors of China ruled under the mandate of heaven. In each case, these rulers were not merely political leaders, they were sacred figures, blood relatives of the gods, maintaining the connection between humanity and the divine. These royal bloodlines were carefully maintained through selective breeding, with marriages arranged to preserve genetic purity. The practice of royal incest, siblings marrying siblings, appears in many ancient cultures from Egypt to the Inca Empire. From a modern genetic standpoint, this seems counterproductive, leading to the expression of harmful recessive traits. But if the goal was to preserve a specific genetic heritage, a legacy of Anunnaki DNA, such practices make more sense. The priests of the ancient temples were another class of intermediaries. They possessed knowledge passed down from the Anunnaki, understanding of astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and the workings of the natural world. They read the stars, predicted eclipses, and maintained calendars of remarkable accuracy. The Mayan calendar, for instance, tracked time in cycles spanning millions of years, with a precision that rivals modern astronomical calculations. How did ancient priests achieve such astronomical knowledge? The conventional explanation is patient observation over centuries, but the Anunnaki theory suggests they were taught directly, given the accumulated wisdom of a civilization far older than humanity, one that had been travelling through space and observing celestial mechanics for millennia. The mystery schools of antiquity, secret societies that guarded esoteric knowledge, may have been repositories of Anunnaki teachings. The Egyptian mysteries, the Babylonian Chaldean priests, the Druids of Celtic Britain, all maintained traditions of hidden knowledge passed from master to initiate. These weren't mere superstitions or primitive rituals. They were structured educational systems designed to preserve and transmit sophisticated understanding of the world. Many of these teachings were encoded in symbols and myths, wrapped in allegory to protect them from the uninitiated. The story of Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods to give to humanity, and was eternally punished for his transgression, may be a mythologized account of Enki teaching forbidden knowledge to humans against Enlil's wishes. The serpent in the Garden of Eden, encouraging humanity to eat from the tree of knowledge, is seen by some scholars as another representation of Enki, whose symbol was the snake. This perspective reframes the biblical fall of man not as a story of sin and punishment, but as humanity's first step toward independence. Knowledge, consciousness, the ability to determine our own path, these were gifts from a benefactor God, even though they came with consequences. We were expelled from the paradise of servitude, forced to survive by our own labour and wit. But we gained something precious in exchange: freedom. As the centuries passed, the memory of the Anunnaki transformed. What began as historical accounts became mythology, and mythology gradually faded into superstition. The physical gods who once walked the earth became abstract concepts, spiritual rather than material. The personal names and specific deeds were forgotten or conflated. The many gods of polytheism gradually gave way to the monotheistic traditions that now dominate much of the world. But according to the Anunnaki theory, the influence of these ancient visitors never truly disappeared. It continued in more subtle forms, through the secret societies that preserved their knowledge, through the bloodlines that carried their genetic legacy, and through the structures of power that still dominate human civilization. This brings us to perhaps the most controversial aspect of the Anunnaki theory: the suggestion that there exists today a hidden elite, a group of individuals descended from these ancient bloodlines, who maintain control over human affairs from behind the scenes. These individuals, often referred to as the Illuminati, the global elite, or the shadow government, supposedly possess knowledge and power denied to the rest of humanity. This aspect of the theory ventures into conspiracy territory that many find difficult to accept. It suggests that major world events, wars, economic crises and political changes are not random or the result of natural social forces, but are orchestrated by this hidden group to maintain their control and advance their agenda. The evidence cited for such claims includes the interconnected nature of global financial institutions, the revolving door between corporate leadership and government positions, the consistency of certain policies across different administrations and countries, and the recurring use of occult symbolism in the insignia of powerful organizations. The eye atop the pyramid on the US dollar bill, for instance, is interpreted as a symbol of the Anunnaki and their human descendants maintaining watch over humanity. It must be noted that this aspect of the theory is highly speculative and not supported by concrete evidence in the way that archaeological anomalies or ancient texts might be. It's an extension of the Anunnaki narrative into the modern world, an attempt to explain contemporary power structures through the lens of this ancient history. Critics rightfully point out that such conspiracy theories can lead to harmful paranoia and scapegoating. Yet there is a kernel of truth in the observation that power tends to concentrate, that wealth and influence often pass through specific families and networks, and that decisions affecting billions of people are made by a relatively small group of individuals. Whether this is evidence of an ancient conspiracy or simply the natural tendency of human social organisation is a matter of interpretation. What is perhaps more interesting is why the Anunnaki theory resonates so strongly with so many people. In an age of increasing disconnection from traditional religious frameworks, when science has demystified much of the natural world, yet left fundamental questions about meaning and purpose unanswered, theories like this offer a different kind of narrative. The Anunnaki story provides a grand unified theory of human history, one that encompasses religion, mythology, archaeology, and even genetics into a single, explanatory framework. It suggests that we're not alone in the universe, that we have never been alone, and that our existence has purpose even if that purpose was initially defined by others. There's something compelling about the idea that we carry within us the genetic legacy of the stars, that we are quite literally children of the gods, even if those gods were not supernatural beings but advanced extraterrestrials. It elevates humanity while also explaining our flaws and limitations. We are not fallen angels but unfinished creations, works in progress who inherited both the brilliance and the failings of our makers. The theory also speaks to a deep-seated intuition that there is more to reality than what we perceive with our ordinary senses, that behind the veil of conventional history lies a deeper truth. This is not a new impulse. It's the same drive that has motivated mystics, philosophers, and seekers throughout the ages. The Anunnaki theory is, in many ways, a modern mythology, using the language and concepts of science fiction and conspiracy to explore timeless questions about human origins and destiny. Mainstream archaeology and anthropology firmly reject the Anunnaki theory as pseudoscience. The evidence, they argue, simply does not support the extraordinary claims being made. Ancient civilizations developed through natural processes, the accumulation of knowledge over generations, trade and cultural exchange, innovation spurred by necessity. The achievements of ancient peoples do not require extraterrestrial intervention to explain. They merely require that we give our ancestors credit for their ingenuity and capabilities. The seemingly impossible precision of ancient structures can be explained by techniques that have been demonstrated experimentally, using only tools and materials available to ancient peoples. The astronomical knowledge of ancient priests can be accounted for by centuries of careful observation and record-keeping. The similarities between mythologies of different cultures reflect common human experiences and the diffusion of ideas through trade and migration, not memories of actual alien visitors. The translations and interpretations of ancient texts by figures like Zecharia Sitchin have been heavily criticized by professional linguists and scholars of ancient languages. They argue that Sitchin took significant liberties with translations, reading meanings into the texts that are not supported by proper linguistic analysis. The planet Nibiru, they contend, is a misinterpretation. The Sumerian texts do not describe a 12th planet at all. From a scientific standpoint, the existence of Nibiru is highly problematic. A planet with a 3,600-year orbit passing through the inner solar system would have dramatic gravitational effects on other planets, effects that we would have observed. Such an orbit would likely be unstable over astronomical timescales. No credible evidence for such a planet has been found, despite intensive searches. The genetic evidence for human origins, while still containing some mysteries, broadly supports the out-of-Africa model of human evolution. We are primates, clearly related to other apes through common descent. The genetic differences that make us human can be explained through the natural processes of mutation and selection over hundreds of thousands of years. The 223 genes that initially appeared to have no precursors have mostly been explained through further research as variations of genes found in other species or as misidentifications in the initial analysis. So where does this leave us? Is the Anunnaki theory merely elaborate fiction, a creative interpretation of ancient texts combined with speculative leaps and misunderstandings of science? Or could there be a core of truth hidden within the layers of speculation and exaggeration? Perhaps the most honest answer is that we don't know with certainty. History, particularly ancient history, is not a precise science. We work with fragmentary evidence, texts that may have been mistranslated or misunderstood, artifacts whose purpose and meaning remain unclear. The further back we look, the less certain we can be about what actually happened. What we can say is that the ancient world was more sophisticated than we often give it credit for. The people of Sumer, Egypt, and other early civilizations were not primitive savages stumbling toward enlightenment. They were intelligent human beings, capable of remarkable achievements, who developed complex societies and advanced knowledge through their own efforts. Whether they did so entirely on their own, or with help from outside sources, may remain forever debatable. The Anunnaki theory presents a provocative alternative to conventional history, one that asks us to reconsider our assumptions and look at familiar evidence with fresh eyes. Even if we ultimately reject the theory, the questions it raises about human origins, ancient knowledge, and the possibility of extraterrestrial contact remain valid and worth exploring. In a universe containing billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars, the idea that Earth is the only planet to develop intelligent life seems increasingly improbable. Many scientists now accept that alien life likely exists somewhere in the cosmos. If such life exists, and if some of it is far more advanced than we are, might it not have visited Earth at some point in our long history? The question is not whether extraterrestrial intelligence exists, but whether it has ever made contact with humanity. And if it has, would we recognize the evidence? Would such contact leave traces that would survive thousands of years? Might it have been misinterpreted by our ancestors as divine intervention, woven into myths and religions that we no longer take literally? These questions take us beyond the specific claims of the Anunnaki theory into broader considerations about the nature of human history and our place in the universe. They challenge us to remain open to possibilities while also maintaining critical thinking and skepticism. Truth, whatever it may be, is not served by either blind belief or reflexive dismissal. The story of the Anunnaki, whether historical fact, elaborate myth, or something in between, touches on fundamental aspects of the human experience. It speaks to our sense of being simultaneously insignificant and cosmically important, of being created yet capable of creation ourselves, of inheriting a legacy that includes both genius and folly. As we continue to explore our world and the universe beyond, as we uncover more about our ancient past and our genetic heritage, perhaps we will find clearer answers to these questions. Perhaps we will discover evidence that conclusively proves or disproves the existence of ancient astronauts. Or perhaps the mystery will deepen, revealing layers of complexity we haven't yet imagined. For now, in the quiet hours of the night, we can contemplate these mysteries without needing to resolve them. We can let our minds drift through the possibilities, considering what it would mean if the Anunnaki were real, if we truly are the children of the stars, carrying within our DNA the legacy of cosmic travelers who came to Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago. The ancient temples still stand, silent sentinels weathering the passage of time. The clay tablets remain, covered in cuneiform script that tells of gods and heroes, of creation and catastrophe. The human genome carries its secrets, waiting to be fully decoded and understood. The universe above continues its eternal dance, planets and stars following courses that may or may not include the mysterious Nibiru. And we, humanity, continue our journey of discovery and understanding, asking questions, seeking answers, building upon the knowledge of those who came before us. Whether we were created by the Anunnaki or evolved through natural processes, whether we are alone in the universe or part of a larger cosmic community, we are here now, conscious and curious, reaching toward the stars from which in one way or another we all came. The story of the Anunnaki is ultimately a story about ourselves, about our need to understand our origins, our desire to believe that we matter in the vast scheme of things, our hope that we are part of something greater than our individual lives. It's a story that challenges us to question authority, to look beyond conventional wisdom, to imagine possibilities that exceed the boundaries of accepted knowledge. In the end, perhaps it doesn't matter whether the Anunnaki literally existed as described. What matters is that their story, like all great myths and mysteries, serves a purpose. It inspires wonder, encourages inquiry, and reminds us that despite all our technological advancement and scientific understanding, there is still mystery in the world, still questions without easy answers, still room for awe and imagination. So as you drift towards sleep, let your mind wander through ancient Mesopotamia, through the halls of ziggurat temples where gods once walked. Imagine the moment when Enki first brought forth humanity, when consciousness sparked in eyes that had never truly seen before. Feel the weight of thousands of years of history, layer upon layer of civilizations rising and falling, knowledge preserved and lost and rediscovered. Consider the possibility that everything you've been taught about human history might be incomplete, that there might be chapters of our story that have been forgotten or deliberately hidden. Consider too the possibility that conventional history is correct, that our ancestors achieved greatness through their own genius without outside intervention, which in its own way is just as remarkable and awe-inspiring. Rest in the mystery, in the not knowing, in the space where questions outnumber answers. Let the ancient stories wash over you like waves on the shore of consciousness, carrying you gently toward the shores of sleep. The Anunnaki, whether gods or aliens, myth or history, represent something eternal in the human psyche, the sense that we are connected to something vast and ancient, that our presence on this planet has meaning beyond mere biological accident, that we carry within us the potential for greatness inherited from those who came before. As civilizations rose and fell, as empires were built and crumbled into dust, this story persisted in various forms. The names changed, the details were altered, but the core narrative remained. Beings from above came to Earth and interacted with humanity in ways that forever changed our destiny. In ancient Egypt, the story took on a different flavour. The gods of the Nile, with their animal heads and human bodies, their sophisticated understanding of death and rebirth, their construction of monuments that seemed to defy the capabilities of their time, all fit within the broader framework of the Anunnaki narrative. The pharaohs were seen as living gods, intermediaries between the divine and mortal realms, perhaps because they carried more of the ancient bloodline than common people. The Egyptian concept of the Ka, the spiritual double that survives death, and the Bay, the personality or soul, suggest a sophisticated understanding of consciousness that seems remarkably advanced for an ancient culture. Their mummification practices, their belief in physical resurrection, their detailed knowledge of the stars and their influence on earthly affairs, all point to a civilization in possession of a knowledge that may have been inherited rather than discovered. The alignment of the pyramids to celestial bodies, the encoding of mathematical constants in their dimensions, the precision of their construction, these factors have led many researchers to conclude that the ancient Egyptians had help or guidance from a more advanced source. Whether that source was the Anunnaki themselves or a previous human, civilization that had been taught by the Anunnaki is a matter of debate within alternative history circles. Moving eastward, we find similar patterns in the civilizations of the Indus Valley and ancient India. The Vedic texts speak of Vimanas, flying machines capable of travelling to distant lands and even to other worlds. They describe weapons of immense power, wars between gods fought in the sky and on Earth, and a cosmology that encompasses vast cycles of time spanning millions of years. The Bhagavad Gita, one of the central texts of Hindu philosophy, is set on a battlefield where gods and heroes interact as physical beings. The Mahabharata contains detailed descriptions of technologies and capabilities that seem more at home in science fiction than in ancient literature. Could these be memories of actual events, accounts of a time when the Anunnaki or similar beings were active on Earth? In South America, the civilizations that arose in the Andes Mountains left behind enigmatic clues. The Nazca lines, massive geoglyphs etched into the desert floor, visible only from the air, raise obvious questions. Why would an ancient people create artworks that could only be appreciated from a vantage point they supposedly could not achieve? The standard explanation is that they had religious or ceremonial purposes, but the Anunnaki theory suggests they might have been navigational markers or messages intended for beings who travelled by air. The city of Tiahuanaco in Bolivia sits at over 12,000 feet above sea level, yet contains evidence of being a port city, with docks and water gates designed for large vessels. The implication is that the city was built when the area was at a much lower elevation, which would place its construction far earlier than conventional archaeology accepts, potentially tens of thousands of years ago when the Anunnaki were most active on Earth. The precision stonework of the Inca civilization and their predecessors displays the same inexplicable accuracy we see in Egypt and other ancient sites. Massive stones cut and fitted with seemingly impossible precision, moved and placed using methods that remain mysterious. The Inca themselves claimed they did not build the most ancient structures, they merely found them and built upon them. If not the Inca, then who? The Anunnaki theory provides an answer. Across the Pacific in Asia, we find more pieces of the puzzle. The Dogon tribe of Mali in West Africa possessed detailed knowledge of the star system Sirius, including information about a companion star, Sirius B, that is invisible to the naked eye and was not discovered by modern astronomy until the 20th century. How did they know about this star? According to their tradition, they were taught by beings who came from Sirius, amphibious creatures they call the Nommo. Are the Nommo another name for the Anunnaki, or perhaps a different group of extraterrestrial visitors? In China, ancient texts speak of the Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor, who descended from the sky in a flying craft and taught humanity various arts and sciences. The Chinese dragon, a benevolent being associated with wisdom, power, and the heavens, may be another cultural representation of the Anunnaki. The sophistication of ancient Chinese civilization, their early development of advanced technologies like gunpowder, paper, and the compass, might reflect inherited knowledge from these ancient teachers. The Americas provide particularly interesting evidence because they were supposedly isolated from the Old World until relatively recent times, yet we find pyramid structures in Mexico and Central America that bear striking similarities to those in Egypt and Mesopotamia. The Mayan calendar, with its sophisticated astronomical calculations and its unusual beginning date in 3114 BCE, suggests knowledge that shouldn't exist in a supposedly isolated culture. The Mayan creation story speaks of beings who came from the sky and created humanity. Multiple attempts were made, with early versions of humans being flawed and destroyed before the final successful creation. This narrative parallels the Sumerian accounts almost exactly, despite the vast geographic and cultural distance between the two civilizations. Either this represents independent development of similar myths, or both are drawing from the same historical events. The sudden abandonment of major Mayan cities around 900 CE remains one of archaeology's enduring mysteries. Thriving urban centres were simply left empty, their populations vanishing into the jungle. While drought and social upheaval are the accepted explanations, some researchers suggest that whatever protective relationship the Mayans had with their gods came to an end, leaving them vulnerable to forces they could no longer withstand. The Aztecs who came after the Mayans spoke of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god who brought knowledge and civilization, then promised to return. When Cortés arrived from across the sea, the Aztecs initially believed he might be Quetzalcoatl returning, a fatal mistake that contributed to their downfall. The image of a serpent or dragon as a bringer of knowledge appears in cultures around the world, from the Nagas of India to the dragons of China to the serpent in Eden, all potentially referring to the same ancient source. The technology of the ancients continues to puzzle researchers. The Antikythera mechanism, recovered from a Roman-era shipwreck, is an analogue computer of astonishing complexity, capable of calculating astronomical positions and predicting eclipses. Nothing of comparable sophistication appears in the historical record for another 1,000 years. How did the knowledge to create such a device arise, and why was it apparently lost? The Baghdad battery, an ancient Parthian artifact, appears to be a functioning galvanic cell, capable of generating electricity. If the ancients had access to electricity, what did they use it for? Some researchers point to Egyptian reliefs that seem to show electrical lighting systems in underground chambers. Could the ancients have possessed electrical technology learned from the Anunnaki? The megalithic structures found worldwide, from Stonehenge to the stone jars of Laos to the Moai of Easter Island, all present similar challenges. Massive stones moved over great distances and positioned with precision using supposedly primitive technology. The conventional explanations require huge numbers of labourers and ingenious engineering using ropes, levers and rollers. The alternative explanation is that the ancients had access to technology that made the work far easier than we imagine. Some researchers have even suggested that the Anunnaki possessed capabilities we might call supernatural, but which were actually advanced physics, technologies that could manipulate gravity or molecular bonds, making massive stones easily movable. The legends of gods using magic to move mountains and reshape the landscape might be cultural memories of such technology in action. The concept of alchemy, so prevalent in medieval and ancient thought, may represent a corrupted understanding of Anunnaki science. The transmutation of elements, the creation of gold from base metals, the search for the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life, these pursuits might have been inspired by actual Anunnaki capabilities. After all, their original mission was to mine gold, and they possessed technology far beyond ours. Might they have been able to synthesize gold, to manipulate matter at the atomic level in ways we're only beginning to understand? The Anunnaki's lifespans, according to the ancient texts, were vastly longer than human ones. Sumerian king lists record reigns lasting thousands of years, which seems absurd until we consider that these might be accurate records of Anunnaki rulers or hybrid human Anunnaki kings who inherited extended lifespans. The biblical patriarchs before the flood lived for hundreds of years, with Methuselah reaching 969 years according to Genesis. After the flood, human lifespans progressively decreased, as if the Anunnaki genetic influence was being diluted with each generation. This raises questions about human aging and mortality. Are we designed to die? Is our relatively short lifespan an intentional limit placed on us by our creators to prevent us from accumulating too much knowledge and power? Or is it simply genetic damage accumulating over thousands of generations, the inevitable degradation of a hybrid species? Modern research into aging and longevity is beginning to suggest that aging is not inevitable, that it might be treatable or even reversible. Perhaps we're finally rediscovering what the Anunnaki always knew. The concept of human souls and the afterlife takes on interesting dimensions within the Anunnaki framework. Most religions teach that humans have an immortal soul, something divine within us that survives physical death. If we are part Anunnaki, then this makes literal sense. We carry within us a spark of their consciousness, their energy, their essence. This is what makes us more than mere animals, what gives us self-awareness and the capacity for abstract thought. The various religious and spiritual traditions regarding the afterlife might be distorted memories of Anunnaki resurrection technology, or their ability to transfer consciousness. The Egyptian emphasis on preserving the body, their belief that the Ka and Ba needed the physical form to return to, might reflect knowledge of actual reanimation techniques. The concept of heaven as a place above, where the righteous go after death, could be a mythologized memory of being taken to the Anunnaki's orbiting platforms or to Nibiru itself. Reincarnation, central to Eastern religions, suggests that consciousness persists through multiple lifetimes, accumulating experience and progressing toward enlightenment. Could this be a memory of how the Anunnaki themselves existed, transferring their consciousness between bodies or cloned vessels, essentially immortal through serial embodiment? The fall of Babel represents another crucial episode in the Anunnaki-humanity relationship. According to Genesis, humans united to build a tower reaching to heaven, to make a name for themselves. God, seeing this, confounded their language and scattered them across the earth. Why would the unified progress of humanity be threatening? The Anunnaki interpretation suggests that humans were becoming too advanced, too unified in purpose. The Tower of Babel was perhaps an actual attempt to reach the orbital platforms of the Anunnaki, or to access space directly. By dividing humanity through language barriers and geographic dispersal, the Anunnaki ensured that humans would remain fragmented, competing with each other, rather than challenging their former masters. Language itself is curious. Human languages are remarkably complex, far more so than seemingly necessary for basic communication. We have abstract concepts, nested grammar structures, the ability to express ideas that have never existed in physical reality. Where did this capacity come from? Natural evolution favours efficiency, yet language seems almost over-engineered for its survival purpose. If language was a gift from the Anunnaki, taught to early humans to make them better servants, it would explain both its complexity and its centrality to human cognition. The diversity of human languages, rather than being a purely natural development, might represent different Anunnaki groups teaching their particular human populations. The Semitic languages, Indo-European languages, Chinese and others might reflect different linguistic traditions of different Anunnaki factions, later evolving and diverging as humans spread and developed on their own. Writing systems show interesting patterns. The most ancient writing, Sumerian cuneiform, appears fully formed without any evidence of gradual development from simpler, symbolic systems. It's as if writing was introduced as a complete system rather than evolving slowly. The same is true of Egyptian hieroglyphics. While later writing systems show clear evolution, the earliest ones seem to spring into existence ready-made. If the Anunnaki taught humans to write, this pattern makes sense. Mathematics and geometry, essential for the construction and astronomical achievements of ancient civilizations, also appear with surprising sophistication in early societies. The Sumerians used a base 60 number system, which we still use for measuring time and angles. This system is mathematically elegant but seemingly arbitrary. Why 60? Because the Anunnaki used such a system, perhaps, and taught it to their human servants. The sacred geometry found in ancient temples and structures worldwide, the use of specific ratios and proportions, the orientation to celestial alignments, all suggest knowledge of mathematical principles that supposedly had not yet been discovered. The golden ratio appears in Greek architecture, Egyptian pyramids, and artwork across cultures. The Fibonacci sequence, deeply embedded in natural forms, was understood and employed by ancient builders. This knowledge could represent gradual human discovery, or it could be inherited wisdom from the Anunnaki, who as spacefaring beings would have necessarily mastered advanced mathematics. The ancient mystery schools, organizations like the Pythagoreans in Greece or the Egyptian priesthoods, guarded mathematical and geometric knowledge as sacred secrets. Why would mathematics be secret? Because it represented real power, knowledge that could be used to manipulate the physical world in ways that would seem like magic to the uninitiated. If this knowledge ultimately derived from the Anunnaki, keeping it restricted would serve to maintain the power differential between the initiated elite and the common people. Secret societies throughout history have claimed to possess ancient wisdom passed down from time immemorial. The Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, the Knights Templar, and others have all suggested that they preserve knowledge from before the flood, from the time when the gods walked among men. While much of this may be romanticized myth-making, there might be genuine lineages of transmitted knowledge, fragments of Anunnaki science and philosophy preserved through the centuries in encoded form. The symbols used by these secret societies, recurring motifs like the eye in the pyramid, the compass and square, the pentagram, might be simplified representations of more complex Anunnaki concepts. Sacred geometry, the study of mathematical ratios in spiritual contexts, might be an attempt to understand and utilize principles that the Anunnaki employed in their technology and architecture. The concept of sacred sites, places of power where the veil between worlds is thin, might reflect actual physical locations where the Anunnaki established their bases and technological installations. Many ancient temples are built on these sites, and they often report unusual phenomena such as magnetic anomalies, strange lights, or effects on human consciousness. Were these places chosen because of natural earth energies, or because they retained some residual effect from Anunnaki technology? Ley lines, the supposed alignments of ancient sites across great distances, represent another mystery that the Anunnaki theory addresses. Researchers have mapped these alignments across Britain, across Europe, and indeed across the entire globe, finding that major ancient sites often fall along straight lines, spanning hundreds or thousands of miles. Skeptics dismiss this as pareidolia, seeing patterns in random data. But if the Anunnaki established a network of bases and monitoring stations across Earth, aligning them along geodetic lines for ease of navigation and energy transmission, these ley lines would represent the infrastructure of their global civilization. Electromagnetic phenomena associated with these sites, increased radioactivity, unusual mineral compositions, all might be remnants of Anunnaki technology, long since degraded but still affecting the local environment. UFO sightings are often concentrated around ancient megalithic sites, suggesting perhaps that these locations still attract visitors, either Anunnaki checking on their old outposts or other extraterrestrial species investigating the artifacts of a civilization that operated on Earth long ago. The moon itself holds mysteries that the Anunnaki theory addresses. The moon is unusually large relative to Earth, leading to some astronomers calling the Earth-Moon system a double planet rather than a planet and satellite. The moon's orbit is nearly circular and lies almost in Earth's equatorial plane, both unusual characteristics. Its density is lower than would be expected, leading to speculation that it might be partially hollow. Ancient texts from various cultures describe a time before the moon existed in the sky. The Zulu legends of South Africa speak of a time when there was no moon. Greek writers reference the Proselins, the pre-lunar people. Could the moon be artificial? A construct brought into orbit by the Anunnaki to serve as a base of operations. The far side of the moon, never visible from Earth due to tidal locking, could house installations we've never seen. The Apollo missions detected unusual seismic activity on the moon, ringing like a bell when impacted, suggesting a hollow structure. They also photographed unusual geometric structures and formations that some researchers interpret as artificial. While NASA provides conventional explanations for these anomalies, the Anunnaki theory suggests the moon might be one of the most important remnants of their presence in our solar system. Mars presents another intriguing piece of the puzzle. The face on Mars, photographed by Viking 1 in 1976, sparked decades of debate. While later high-resolution images show it to be a natural mesa with lighting effects creating the illusion of a face, the initial discovery led researchers to examine the Cydonia region more closely. They found what appear to be pyramidal structures arranged in geometric patterns, similar to layouts of ancient Earth sites. Could Mars have been another Anunnaki outpost, perhaps even a way station on their journey from Nibiru to Earth? The planet shows evidence of having once had liquid water, a thicker atmosphere, and possibly conditions suitable for life. Did the Anunnaki terraform Mars as they did Earth? Did some catastrophe, perhaps related to the destruction of a planet between Mars and Jupiter that left the asteroid belt, devastate the Martian facilities and strip away its atmosphere? The moons of Mars, Phobos and Deimos have unusual characteristics that have led some astronomers to speculate they might be artificial. They orbit in nearly perfect circles, unusual for captured asteroids. Phobos has a very low density for its size and features a mysterious monolith, a rectangular structure jutting from its surface that has puzzled researchers. Could these moons be ancient Anunnaki constructs, space stations or resource processing facilities now dead and silent? As humanity has developed its own space capabilities, we may be retracing the steps of our creators. The drive to explore space, to establish colonies on other worlds, might not just be human curiosity but inherited instinct. The Anunnaki imperative to expand and colonize, expressing itself through their genetic heirs. The coming age, according to some interpretations of ancient prophecies, will see the return of the Anunnaki. The approach of Nibiru, if it exists, would bring the gods back to Earth. Some researchers suggest that increased UFO activity, the apparent preparation by governments for mass contact scenarios, and the acceleration of technological development are all signs that this return is imminent. What would such a return mean for humanity? Would the Anunnaki come as benevolent parents, pleased with how their children have developed? Or would they come as overlords reclaiming their property, expecting us to resume our servitude? Or might they arrive as indifferent observers, as we might regard an old science experiment, curious about the results, but no longer invested in the outcome? The UFO phenomenon of the modern era might already represent sporadic Anunnaki contact. The descriptions of different types of alien beings reported by abductees, the tall Nordics, the reptilians, the Greys, might be different factions of Anunnaki or different species that work with them. The genetic experiments reported by abductees, the taking of eggs and sperm, might be continuing modifications of the human genome, further refinements of their original creation. The cattle mutilations and animal deaths associated with UFO activity could be monitoring programs, the Anunnaki checking on the biosphere they modified long ago, ensuring that their genetic manipulations remain stable. The human abduction phenomenon might serve a similar purpose, updating the genetic profile of humanity, perhaps preparing us for their return. The message of the contactees, those who claim direct communication with extraterrestrial intelligence, often includes warnings about environmental destruction, nuclear weapons, and human conflicts. If the Anunnaki view Earth as their property and humanity as their creation, they would naturally be concerned about us destroying the planet or ourselves. Their interventions, if occurring, might be designed to prevent us from rendering Earth uninhabitable before they return. The development of nuclear weapons in the 1940s coincided with a massive increase in UFO reports. The first nuclear test, Trinity, occurred in July 1945. The modern UFO era is generally dated to 1947 with Kenneth Arnold's sighting and the Roswell incident. If the Anunnaki have been monitoring Earth, the detonation of atomic weapons would certainly attract their attention. The power to split atoms, to unleash energy locked in matter itself, might be a technological threshold that signals a civilization's maturity or danger level. Several nuclear facilities have reported UFO activity, with objects hovering over missile silos and apparently deactivating nuclear weapon systems. Former military personnel have testified to these incidents. If the Anunnaki created us, they might feel entitled to prevent us from destroying ourselves and their planet with nuclear fire. Or they might simply be ensuring we don't damage Earth's biosphere beyond repair before they return to reclaim it. The rapid acceleration of human technological development over the past century is unprecedented in our history. For thousands of years, technology advanced slowly. Then, in just over 100 years, we went from horse-drawn carriages to spacecraft, from telegram to internet, from basic chemistry to genetic engineering. Why this sudden explosion of progress? The conventional explanation attributes this to the scientific method, industrial revolution, and the cumulative effect of technological building blocks. But some researchers suggest that we've been receiving help, that information is being gradually released to humanity by the Anunnaki or other interested parties. The stories of inventors receiving inspiration in dreams or sudden flashes of insight might be more literal than we realise. Nikola Tesla, one of history's most brilliant inventors, claimed to receive visions of devices fully formed in his mind. He spoke of communicating with intelligences beyond Earth. His inventions, including alternating current, radio, and many technologies still classified or unexplored, came in a rush of productivity that transformed modern civilization. Was Tesla in contact with the Anunnaki, receiving knowledge from them directly? The cargo cults of the Pacific Islands provide an interesting parallel to humanity's relationship with the Anunnaki. During World War II, isolated island populations saw advanced technology, airplanes and radios, for the first time. The military forces brought cargo, goods of such abundance and variety that they seemed magical. When the military left after the war, some islanders created cargo cults, building mock airplanes and runways, performing rituals to bring back the cargo and the people who brought it. These cults understood that the advanced beings had come from the sky, had brought wonderful things, and had left with promises or predictions of return. The islanders' understanding was incomplete, their methods ineffective, but their core insight was correct. There were more advanced beings who had visited and might return. Is this not analogous to humanity's relationship with the Anunnaki? We remember they came from the sky, brought knowledge, and left. We perform rituals in our temples and churches, hoping for their return, building our own civilization in imitation of theirs. The various religious expectations of a messianic return, whether the second coming of Christ, the arrival of the Mahdi, or the return of the Avatar, might all be cultural memories of the promised return of the Anunnaki. These prophecies speak of judgment, of the separation of the righteous from the wicked, of a new age beginning. If the Anunnaki return, they might indeed judge what we've done with our world and with the potential they gave us. Would we pass their evaluation? Have we proven ourselves worthy of our divine inheritance? Or have we squandered it, fighting among ourselves, destroying the environment, creating weapons capable of annihilating all life? This is perhaps the most profound question that the Anunnaki theory forces us to confront. What does it mean to be human? And what responsibility comes with our suspected divine origins? If we are experiments, creations, genetic constructs, does that absolve us of moral responsibility? Or does it make us even more accountable, knowing that we represent the legacy of our creators? The potential return of the Anunnaki gives cosmic stakes to human choices. We are not just determining our own fate, but proving or disproving the worth of our Creator's project. This brings us full circle to questions of meaning and purpose. The Anunnaki theory, whatever its factual accuracy, speaks to the human need to feel part of something larger. We want to believe that our existence is not mere accident, that consciousness and intelligence have purpose in the universe, that we matter to someone or something beyond ourselves. Traditional religions provide this meaning through relationship with God or gods. Secular humanism finds meaning in human potential and progress. The Anunnaki theory offers a middle path, grounding our origins in the physical universe while maintaining elements of the divine. We are special, created by design, yet our creators are themselves part of the natural universe, subject to its laws even if they understand them better than we do. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in synthesis. Perhaps the ancient texts describe real events, but events less literal than Sitchin interpreted. Perhaps there were advanced human civilizations before the known historical record, who possessed sophisticated knowledge later lost in catastrophes and preserved only in myths. Perhaps these precursor civilizations were in contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, creating the kernel of truth around which the Anunnaki narrative formed. Perhaps consciousness itself is the link, the true divinity we all share, not limited to any planet or species. Perhaps the Anunnaki, if they exist, are simply further along the path that all conscious beings travel, and their intervention in human development was less about genetic manipulation and more about spiritual awakening, teaching us to recognize the divine spark within ourselves. As you drift deeper into sleep, let go of the need for certainty. The beauty of mysteries is that they remain open, inviting exploration and contemplation. Whether the Anunnaki were real or mythical, whether we were created or evolved, whether we are alone or surrounded by cosmic neighbours, the fundamental wonder remains unchanged. You are here, conscious, aware, able to contemplate these vast questions. In this moment, regardless of how it came to be, you participate in the grand mystery of existence. Your DNA carries 4 billion years of Earth's evolutionary story. Your atoms were forged in the hearts of dying stars. You are, quite literally, the universe experiencing itself. Sleep now, and dream of ancient cities beneath unfamiliar stars, of beings who travelled the cosmic ocean to plant the seeds of consciousness on a young blue world, of the long journey from those first engineered humans to the person you are today. Dream of possibility, of mystery, of the infinite permutations of what might have been and what might yet be. The stars wheel overhead as they have for billions of years, indifferent and eternal. Somewhere among them might orbit Nibiru, carrying the Anunnaki on their slow journey through the depths of space. Or perhaps not. Perhaps we are truly alone, and must find meaning in ourselves and each other, rather than looking to the stars for answers. Either way, the story continues. Human civilization advances. We reach towards space. We manipulate genes and split atoms. We become more like the gods of ancient myth with each passing decade. Perhaps this is our destiny, to fulfill the potential encoded in us by the Anunnaki. Or perhaps we are creating our own destiny, writing a new chapter in the story of life and consciousness in the universe. The silence of the desert night stretches across millennia. Sand covers what were once thriving cities. Wind erodes monuments that once proclaimed the glory of gods and kings. Yet beneath the surface, both literal and metaphorical, the traces remain. The story of the Anunnaki, whether history or mythology, continues to unfold as new discoveries emerge from the earth, and new interpretations arise from ancient texts. Consider the nature of knowledge itself, how it is transmitted, preserved, and lost. The ancient Library of Alexandria, containing perhaps 500,000 scrolls, the accumulated wisdom of the ancient world, was destroyed. How much knowledge vanished in those flames? What secrets of the past? What records of the Anunnaki presence? What technical manuals and historical accounts were lost forever? The burning of the library was not an isolated incident. Throughout history, conquering armies have destroyed the records of the conquered. The Spanish conquistadors burned the Mayan codices, thousands of books preserving the knowledge of centuries, leaving only 4 surviving to the present day. The Chinese Emperor Qin Shi Huang ordered the burning of books and the burying of scholars to erase competing schools of thought. How many times has humanity's collective memory been deliberately erased? If the Anunnaki wished to obscure their presence, to allow humanity to develop without the psychological burden of knowing we are creations rather than natural beings, they would need to remove obvious evidence. The gradual transition from direct rule to indirect influence to complete withdrawal would require the elimination of technological artifacts, the destruction or removal of clear proofs, leaving only the ambiguous traces we find today. Or perhaps the evidence degrades naturally. Technology, no matter how advanced, requires maintenance. A civilization that departed 3,600 years ago, or even longer, would leave behind only the most durable remnants. Stone structures survive. Electronic devices, computers, vehicles, all the apparatus of advanced technology would corrode, decay, and return to base elements within centuries or millennia at most. What would remain of our current civilization if humanity disappeared tomorrow? The great cities would crumble within decades. Roads would crack and be overgrown. Metal structures would rust and collapse. Within a few thousand years, only the most massive stone constructions would remain recognizable. Alien archaeologists visiting Earth in 10,000 years might struggle to understand what we were, might debate whether our impressive ruins were really built by primitive humans or required outside assistance. This perspective should make us more sympathetic to ancient peoples. If we might leave little trace, why should we expect them to have left more? The absence of obvious Anunnaki technology might simply reflect the passage of time, not the absence of such technology. What we find, the stone temples and monuments, the durable infrastructure, might be all that survives of a much more extensive presence. The oral traditions of indigenous peoples around the world preserve stories that academic archaeology often dismisses as mere folklore. Native American legends speak of sky, people, star beings who came to Earth and interacted with humans. Aboriginal Australian stories tell of the Wangina, powerful spirits who came from the sky and the sea, who painted their own images on rock walls and gave the people laws and knowledge. These oral traditions, passed down through countless generations, are often remarkably consistent in their core elements, even as details vary. The emphasis on accuracy and oral transmission in cultures that lack writing is extraordinary. Master storytellers memorize vast epics word for word, passing them to apprentices who must learn them perfectly. The content of these traditions may be more reliable than we generally credit. If we take these stories at face value, as accounts of real experiences passed down through time, a picture emerges of widespread contact between ancient humans and more advanced beings. These beings came from the sky, possessed powerful abilities or technologies, taught humans various skills, and established rules or commandments for human behavior. The consistency of these elements across cultures that had no contact with one another suggests either a universal human psychological pattern that generates such stories or actual historical events remembered by different populations. The phenomenon of prophets and visionaries throughout history who claim direct contact with divine beings takes on new meaning in this context. Moses on Mount Sinai, receiving the commandments from Yahweh amid thunder and fire, with the mountain shaking and smoke rising. Muhammad in the cave, visited by the angel Gabriel, who gave him the words of the Quran. Joseph Smith discovering golden tablets that became the Book of Mormon, translated through special instruments. Were these genuine spiritual experiences, psychological phenomena, or actual physical encounters with the Anunnaki or their representatives? The descriptions often include physical details that seem more technological than supernatural. The Ark of the Covenant, the box containing the tablets Moses received, was overlaid with gold and carried specific instructions for handling, including that it should not be touched directly. When someone did touch it in the biblical account, they died instantly. This sounds less like a simple container and more like an electrical device, a capacitor perhaps, that could deliver a lethal shock. The biblical description of Yahweh includes physical characteristics that seem oddly specific for an omnipotent deity. He appears in fire and cloud. He cannot be looked upon directly. His presence requires specific physical preparations and protections. These sound like the requirements for approaching a powerful energy source or advanced technology, or perhaps for encountering a being whose physiology is incompatible with human biology in some way. The angels, the messengers of God, who appear throughout biblical and other religious texts, are described as having physical form. They eat food, they wrestle with humans, they can be mistaken for ordinary men. The famous angels who visited Sodom and Gomorrah were initially mistaken for travellers seeking shelter. Only their extraordinary powers revealed them as something more than human. Could these be Anunnaki, or perhaps their human hybrid servants carrying out missions on Earth? The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah itself bears striking similarities to descriptions of nuclear warfare. The cities were destroyed by fire from heaven. Lot's wife looked back and was turned into a pillar of salt. The land became barren, unable to support life. archaeological investigations of the Dead Sea region have found evidence of sudden intense heat and unusual geological formations consistent with massive explosions. If the Anunnaki factions were at war, or if human cities needed to be destroyed for rebellion or contamination, they would have had the technological means to do so. The concept of angels themselves provides an interesting parallel to the Anunnaki hierarchy. In traditional angelology, there are multiple ranks of angels: seraphim, cherubim, thrones, dominions, virtues, powers, principalities, archangels, and angels. Each rank has different responsibilities and capabilities. This complex bureaucratic structure sounds very much like the organization of a spacefaring civilization, with different roles for different members from the leadership down to common workers. The fallen angels, led by Lucifer or Satan depending on the tradition, rebelled against God and were cast out of heaven. This narrative parallels the Igigi rebellion among the Anunnaki, the worker revolt that led to the creation of humanity. Perhaps these are two versions of the same event, or perhaps multiple rebellions occurred at different times. The idea that not all Anunnaki agreed with the leadership's decisions, that factions developed with different agendas regarding humanity, provides a framework for understanding the complexity of ancient myths. Satan, the adversary, the serpent in Eden who encouraged humanity to eat from the tree of knowledge, might be another representation of Enki, the Anunnaki scientist who created humans and later defied orders to preserve them through the flood. If Enlil and the leadership wanted to keep humans ignorant and subservient, while Enki wanted to elevate his creations, then Enki becomes the adversary from the leadership's perspective, even while being humanity's benefactor. This reinterpretation dramatically changes the moral framework of the biblical narrative. The serpent becomes the hero, not the villain. The fall from Eden is not humanity's original sin, but our liberation. The God who expels Adam and Eve is not the loving father of Christian theology, but a master angry that his slaves have learned too much. This reading, while heretical from a traditional religious standpoint, aligns with the Anunnaki narrative and offers a very different understanding of human spiritual development. The Gnostic traditions, early Christian sects that were suppressed as heretical, taught something very similar to this interpretation. The Gnostics believed that the material world was created by a false god, the demiurge, who trapped divine souls in physical bodies. The true God, beyond and above the demiurge, sent the serpent to free humanity from ignorance. Salvation came through knowledge, gnosis, rather than faith. The Gnostic texts, discovered at Nag Hammadi in 1945, present a radically different version of creation that aligns more closely with the Anunnaki theory than with Orthodox Christianity. Were the Gnostics preserving a more accurate version of the ancient story, one that had not been edited and revised by religious authorities seeking to control the narrative? Their suppression by the early church, the destruction of their texts and persecution of their followers, might have been necessary to maintain the orthodox version that supported religious hierarchy and authority. Control of information, control of the narrative about human origins and our relationship with the divine, provides tremendous social and political power. If people believe they are born sinners, fundamentally flawed, and in need of salvation that only the church can provide, they are easier to control. If instead people believe they carry divine genetics, that they are the offspring of gods with immense potential, they are much harder to subjugate. This pattern repeats throughout history. Those in power control what is taught, what is remembered, what is considered truth. The victors write the history books. The establishment determines what is orthodox and what is heresy. Challenging the official narrative has always been dangerous, from Socrates drinking hemlock to Galileo under house arrest to modern whistleblowers and dissidents. The Anunnaki theory is itself a challenge to multiple establishments. Religious orthodoxy that claims humans were created by an all-powerful singular god. Scientific orthodoxy that insists on purely naturalistic explanations for human origins and ancient achievements. And political orthodoxy that resists any suggestion of hidden manipulation by elite bloodlines. No wonder it is dismissed, ridiculed, and relegated to the fringes of acceptable discourse. Yet the questions it raises refuse to disappear. Each new archaeological discovery that doesn't fit the conventional timeline, each genetic mystery that challenges the standard evolutionary narrative, each ancient text that suggests knowledge that shouldn't exist, keeps the theory alive and draws new adherents. The internet age has democratized information, making it harder for any single narrative to dominate completely. People can research for themselves, draw their own conclusions, and share alternative perspectives without requiring approval from gatekeepers. This democratization of knowledge mirrors, in a way, the original gift from Enki to humanity. Just as he gave us the capacity for independent thought against the wishes of the Anunnaki leadership, the internet gives us access to information against the wishes of modern establishments. Whether this leads to enlightenment or chaos remains to be seen. Just as the Anunnaki apparently worried that humanity with too much knowledge would become uncontrollable, modern authorities worry about misinformation, conspiracy theories, and the breakdown of consensus reality. But perhaps discomfort with uncertainty, with multiple competing narratives, is necessary for growth. A child who never questions their parents' teachings never truly matures. A civilization that never challenges its foundational myths never advances beyond them. The Anunnaki theory, even if entirely wrong in its specifics, serves the valuable purpose of making us question, investigate, and think critically about our origins and our history. The archaeological establishment has been wrong before. Troy was considered purely mythical until Heinrich Schliemann discovered it. The existence of the Hittite Empire mentioned in the Bible was doubted until their ruins and records were found. Viking settlements in North America were dismissed as fantasy until Lonso Meadows was excavated. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, with its massive carved pillars dated to 11,600 years ago, was not supposed to exist according to the accepted timeline of human civilization, yet there it stands. Each of these discoveries required someone to believe that the myths contained truth, to look for evidence where orthodox scholarship said there was nothing to find. The researchers who make such discoveries are often initially ridiculed, their work dismissed, their credentials questioned. Only later, when the evidence becomes undeniable, are they vindicated and celebrated. Might we be in a similar position with the Anunnaki? Perhaps definitive evidence exists but has not yet been found, or has been found but not recognized for what it is, or has been suppressed by those with interest in maintaining the current narrative. Or perhaps the evidence will never be found because it doesn't exist, because the theory is simply wrong. But the possibility keeps the search alive. The search itself has value regardless of what is found. In looking for the Anunnaki, researchers have made other discoveries, asked interesting questions, developed new techniques, and inspired public interest in ancient history. The journey of investigation, even if it doesn't reach the desired destination, expands human knowledge and understanding. As you lie here in the darkness, feeling sleep approaching ever closer, consider what it means to not know, to exist in uncertainty. Our modern world prizes certainty, demands proof, insists on definitive answers. But our ancestors lived with mystery as a constant companion. The movements of stars, the causes of disease, the nature of consciousness, all were profound mysteries that generated stories, rituals, and endless speculation. We have explained many of those ancient mysteries through science, and in doing so we have lost something of the sense of wonder, the feeling of participating in a cosmos full of magic and meaning. The Anunnaki theory, and theories like it, attempt to restore that sense of wonder while still engaging with evidence and logic. They exist in the boundary zone between science and mythology, trying to bridge the gap between material facts and spiritual meaning. Perhaps this is their real function, not to be literally true in every detail, but to keep alive the questions that make us human. Who are we? Where did we come from? What is our purpose? Are we alone? These questions have no final answers, or at least none that we can currently access. But asking them, exploring possible answers, following the chains of evidence and logic wherever they lead, this is what conscious beings do. The Anunnaki, real or imagined, represent something important in the human psyche. They are the parents we search for, the creators who owe us explanation, the gods who might return and make everything clear. They are the hope that someone, somewhere, knows the answers to questions that torment us and might one day share that knowledge. Or they are the projection of our own fears and desires onto the ambiguous canvas of the past, seeing patterns that confirm what we want to believe. The human brain is exquisitely tuned to find patterns, even in random noise. We see faces in clouds, hear messages in static, find meaning in coincidence. Perhaps the Anunnaki are the ultimate pareidolia, a pattern we impose on disparate facts because we need there to be a pattern, because randomness and meaninglessness are too terrible to accept. But what if the opposite is true? What if we dismiss genuine patterns as pareidolia because accepting them would require too much change in our worldview? What if our skepticism, our insistence on conventional explanations, is itself a form of denial, a refusal to see what is plainly before us because it contradicts everything we've been taught? This is the eternal tension between belief and skepticism, between open-mindedness and critical thinking. Both are necessary. Pure skepticism rejects everything, closing itself off from new information and perspectives. Pure belief accepts everything, losing the ability to discriminate between truth and falsehood. The path of wisdom lies between holding possibilities lightly while examining evidence carefully, willing to change views when warranted but not swayed by every novel claim. The Anunnaki theory deserves this balanced approach, neither dismissing it out of hand because it contradicts conventional wisdom, nor accepting it uncritically because it offers appealing answers. Instead, examining the evidence, considering the arguments, acknowledging both the intriguing correlations and the significant problems, and remaining open to further information as it emerges. Future discoveries may resolve these questions. Genetic analysis continues to advance, potentially revealing more about human origins and any anomalies in our genome. Archaeological excavations may uncover clearer evidence of ancient advanced technology or contact with non-human intelligence. Space exploration might find artifacts on the Moon or Mars, or detect signals from extraterrestrial civilizations. Or perhaps nothing definitive will ever be found, and the mystery will remain forever open, each generation reinterpreting the evidence through the lens of their own time and culture. In the meantime, in this present moment as sleep draws near, we can find peace in the mystery itself. Not every question needs an answer. Not every problem needs a solution. Sometimes it is enough to wonder, to contemplate possibilities, to feel awe at the vastness of time and space and the improbability of our own existence. If the Anunnaki created us, we are their legacy, carrying their genes and their hopes forward into an unknown future. If we evolved naturally through the blind forces of selection and mutation, we are no less remarkable, perhaps more so, for having emerged from simpler life through no guiding hand. Either way, we are here, conscious, wondering, striving to understand. The ancient Sumerians who first wrote about the Anunnaki could not have imagined the world we live in now. They knew nothing of genetics, of space travel, of the vast age of the Earth and universe, yet they looked at the same stars we see, wondered about the same fundamental questions, and told stories that still resonate thousands of years later. Their words, pressed into clay tablets and buried in desert sands, waited patiently for us to discover and translate them. What would they make of our interpretation of their texts? Would they recognize the Anunnaki as we describe them, or would they be baffled by our misunderstanding? We can never know. The gulf of time is too vast, the cultural differences too profound. We can only work with what remains, knowing our interpretations are filtered through our modern perspective, coloured by our assumptions and biases. Future generations will look back at our time with similar perspective. They will see our blind spots, our false certainties, the things we were convinced of that turned out to be wrong. They may marvel at questions we thought important or laugh at debates we took seriously. Such is the nature of time and changing knowledge. Each era does its best with available information, and that is all any generation can do. The story of the Anunnaki will continue to evolve as long as humans contemplate their origins. New interpretations will arise, new evidence will be discovered or reinterpreted, new technologies will enable analyses impossible today. The theory in its current form might be vindicated, disproven, or transformed into something neither believers nor skeptics currently anticipate. What remains constant is the human need for story, for narrative that makes sense of existence, whether expressed through science or religion, or alternative theories like the Anunnaki. We are storytelling beings trying to understand our place in the universe. The story gives structure to chaos, meaning to randomness, purpose to existence. As consciousness fades into sleep, the need for stories remains. Dreams are stories the unconscious mind tells itself, processing the day's experiences, working through problems, exploring possibilities freed from waking logic's constraints. In dreams, the impossible becomes possible. The dead return to life. We fly without wings. Time flows backward and forward simultaneously. Perhaps dreams are glimpses into other dimensions or parallel realities. Perhaps they are artifacts of neural processing, random firings interpreted as narrative, or perhaps they are messages from some deeper source of wisdom, the divine or extraterrestrial, or simply our own higher consciousness attempting to communicate with the waking mind. The shamans and mystics of ancient cultures took dreams seriously, interpreting them as visitations from spirits or gods, journeys to other realms, prophecies of future events. Modern psychology sees them as windows into the unconscious, revealing hidden desires, unresolved conflicts, suppressed memories. Both perspectives honour dreams as meaningful even while disagreeing about the source of that meaning. If the Anunnaki wished to communicate with humans while remaining hidden, dreams would be an ideal medium, direct enough to convey information, ambiguous enough to maintain deniability. The visionary experiences of prophets and mystics throughout history often occur in altered states, whether dreams, trances, or meditation. Perhaps these are the moments when human consciousness becomes receptive to contact with other intelligences. The collective unconscious, the shared symbolic language that appears across human cultures, might be genetic memory passed down from the Anunnaki. The archetypes Jung identified, the recurring symbols and patterns in myths and dreams worldwide, could be hardwired into the human genome by our creators, templates for understanding the world that transcend individual experience or cultural learning. Or they might arise from the common structure of human brains and the universal challenges of human existence. Birth, death, parents, children, danger, safety. These are experiences all humans share regardless of time or place. That we develop similar symbolic languages to process these experiences might require no explanation beyond common humanity. Yet the specificity of some shared symbols is striking. The world tree connecting heaven, earth, and underworld appears in Norse, Mayan, Hindu, and Siberian traditions despite these cultures having no contact. The flood myth is virtually universal, found on every continent in cultures that developed independently. The divine trickster, the dying and resurrecting god, the hero's journey, these patterns repeat with remarkable consistency. Might these be memories of actual events? The world tree representing Anunnaki technology connecting their ships to Earth, the flood an actual catastrophe witnessed by survivors around the globe, the dying god representing the sacrifice of an Anunnaki who loved humanity. Or are they universal patterns emergent from human psychology, finding expression in whatever cultural context they arise? The answer may be both and, rather than either or. Psychological patterns might be triggered or reinforced by actual events. Genetic memory might interact with personal experience to generate symbols that are simultaneously universal and culturally specific. The human mind is complex enough to contain multitudes, to process information on multiple levels simultaneously, to create meanings that are true in different ways at different scales. As you sink deeper into sleep, let the boundaries dissolve. The need to know, to categorize, to judge true or false, release these and simply experience. In sleep, we touch something primal, something that existed before language and logic, before science and skepticism, before history was recorded and myths were written down. In this space, the Anunnaki are as real as anything else. They exist in the stories we tell, the questions we ask, the wonder we feel when contemplating our origins. Whether they exist in physical form, whether they ever walked the earth as the ancient texts describe, becomes less important than what they represent. The mystery of consciousness, the possibility of contact with other minds, the hope that we are part of something larger than ourselves. Sleep now and let the ancient story wash through you. See the great ships descending from the stars, burning through atmospheres, touching down on an earth young and wild. Feel the weight of hundreds of thousands of years, civilizations rising and falling, genes mixing and separating, knowledge gained and lost and rediscovered. Imagine walking through the streets of ancient Sumer, the ziggurats rising against the desert sky, the markets bustling with goods from distant lands, the scribes carefully pressing wedges into wet clay, recording transactions and tales that will survive millennia. Imagine the priests in their ceremonies, speaking words in languages now dead, performing rituals whose meanings were ancient even then. See Enki in his underwater palace, the Abzu, working with the building blocks of life, combining genetic material from different species, creating new forms, playing God because he is one. Watch as the first true human opens her eyes, sees the world with awareness that no animal possesses, speaks her first words in a language given not learned. Follow the long centuries as humans multiply and spread, as the Anunnaki watch with satisfaction or concern, as factions develop and conflicts arise. Be present at the councils where humanity's fate is debated, where Enlil argues for limits and control while Enki advocates for freedom and potential. Witness the great flood, waters rising impossible distances, covering mountains, erasing cities and populations, leaving only a chosen few to preserve life's diversity. Feel the terror of those who died and the grief of those who survived. See the new world emerging from receding waters, mud and devastation giving way to renewed growth. Watch as humans build again, creating civilizations of unprecedented sophistication, guided by the gods who walk among them. Marvel at the construction of monuments that will outlast nations and empires, structures built with purpose we can only guess at now. Experience the gradual withdrawal of the gods. As direct rule becomes advisory, it becomes absence. Feel humanity's confusion and loss as the beings who shaped every aspect of existence disappear, leaving only memories and instructions, tablets and traditions, bloodlines and priesthoods to maintain the connection. Follow the thread through the centuries as memory becomes myth, as concrete history transforms into symbolic story, as the many gods become one god becomes abstract principle. See how the essential truth, if truth it was, gets overlaid with interpretation and reinterpretation, how each culture adapts the story to its own needs and understanding. Come forward through time, through the rise and fall of empires, the Dark Ages and Renaissance, the age of exploration and industrial revolution, the world wars and the space age, arriving finally at now, at this present moment where you lie in darkness, contemplating mysteries older than writing, older than civilization, perhaps older than humanity itself. And now let it all go. The grand story, the cosmic drama, the questions and theories and speculations, release them all. Float in the space between waking and sleeping, where consciousness softens and merges with something larger. Here, all stories are true and none are true. Here, the Anunnaki and the angels, the gods and the aliens, all exist in the same mythical space that has always nurtured human imagination. Let your breathing slow further, each breath deeper and more relaxed than the last. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the surface beneath you, muscles releasing tension, mind releasing thoughts. There is nothing to do, nowhere to go, nothing to figure out or understand. The universe is vast beyond comprehension. Earth is a small world orbiting an average star in one galaxy among billions. The atoms in your body were forged in stellar furnaces billions of years ago, scattered by supernovae, drawn together by gravity into this planet, this body, this moment of awareness. You are star stuff contemplating stars, the universe knowing itself through the miracle of consciousness. Whether that consciousness arose through Anunnaki engineering, or through the patient work of evolution, matters less than the simple fact that it exists, that you exist, aware and wondering. This present moment, this now, is all that truly exists. The past is memory, the future imagination. Only now is real, and in this now you are whole and complete, part of the great web of existence that connects all things. The Anunnaki theory, like all theories and stories, is a map attempting to describe territory. But the map is not the territory. Reality remains mysterious regardless of how we attempt to explain it. Our stories, scientific and religious and alternative, are all provisional approximations, useful but incomplete, pointing toward truth but never capturing it fully. Rest in not knowing. Rest in the mystery that surrounds us always, the great unknown that no amount of knowledge can ever fully dispel. There is comfort here, permission to simply be without needing to understand everything, without requiring answers to every question. The ancient Sumerians are dust. The Anunnaki, if they existed, have long since departed. The civilizations that rose and fell, the knowledge gained and lost, the countless lives lived and forgotten, all have returned to the earth from which they came. Yet something persists, something beyond the physical forms and temporal circumstances. The stories remain, the questions endure, the quest for understanding continues. You are part of that continuity, a link in the chain of consciousness stretching back through time, to the first awareness that sparked in some ancient being, and forward into futures we cannot imagine. Your questions are humanity's questions. Your wonder is the wonder that has driven progress since the first human looked up at the stars and asked why. Sleep now, deeply and peacefully. Let the mysteries dissolve into the darkness behind your eyes. Let the grand narratives fade into the simple rhythm of breathing. Let consciousness release its grip and drift into the healing rest that every living thing requires. In sleep you return to something like the primordial state before consciousness fully emerged, before the split between subject and object, before the endless questions and seeking. There is profound rest here, regeneration and renewal. The body heals, the mind processes and integrates, preparing for the new day that will inevitably come. And when you wake, the questions will still be there, unchanged by your sleep. The mystery of human origins, the possibility of ancient astronauts, the nature of consciousness itself, these will remain as they have always remained, inviting investigation and contemplation. But you will meet them refreshed, ready to engage once more with the great puzzles of existence. For now there is only rest, only the gentle fade into unconsciousness, only the sweet release of sleep. The Anunnaki watch over your dreams if they watch at all, or perhaps the universe itself watches through the consciousness that briefly flickered in your form. Either way, you are held, you are safe. You are part of the great unfolding story that has no beginning and no end, that simply is and always has been and always will be. Thank you for journeying through this mystery with sleepless survivors tonight. May your sleep be deep, and your dreams be filled with wonder, with ancient wisdom and future possibilities, with the peace that comes from releasing the need to know and simply trusting in the great mystery that holds us all. Rest well, dreamer. The stars shine on, the universe continues its dance, and consciousness persists in its eternal exploration of itself. You are part of that grand adventure now and forever. Good night, and sleep peacefully.